The X-Men battle suits. If you think the X-Men wore the same leather suits across all three films, look closer. Some of these suits hid surprising secrets, from 9-hour makeup marathons to designs you barely noticed on screen. The original 2000 costumes were one-piece jumpsuits, uncomfortable, restrictive, and inspired more by The Matrix than any comic book. By The Last Stand, Makovsky and co-designer Lisa Tomcheshin had evolved them into separate jacket and pants combinations. More piping, more detail, easier to put on and take off. Makovsky's philosophy was specific. The X-Men films are grounded in today's world, which made reconciling comic book fantasy with reality her biggest challenge. She described it as more difficult than Harry Potter, where she could invent an entire magical aesthetic from scratch. Here, everything had to feel like it could exist. The updated suits kept the black leather foundation but incorporated more pronounced X motifs on collars and buckles. Functional designs for actors running, fighting, and doing wire work for 12-hour days. Beast, Kelsey Grammer. Kelsey Grammer's Beast needed 3 full hours in the makeup chair every single day. The process started with latex prosthetics applied to his face, followed by blue paint around the eyes and lips. Then came the hair pieces and wigs, and underneath it all, a muscle suit covered entirely in hand-punched fur, individual strands applied one at a time. Grammer described the mid-process look as a cross between an orc from Lord of the Rings and a Smurf. Even his hands were custom-made. Latex rubber gloves with applied hair and fingernails. Custom teeth caps completed the transformation. But here's what's interesting. Beast's suit was deliberately designed to look older than the rest of the team's uniforms. Hank McCoy had been an X-Man decades ago, and his vintage suit reflected that history. A subtle detail most viewers never consciously notice. Grammer even had 2 different sets of gloves, evening gloves for formal scenes and work gloves for action sequences. The man played a cabinet member and an acrobatic fighter in the same film. He later admitted he turned down a sizable chunk of change to appear at a fan convention in full Beast makeup. 3 hours is 3 hours. Phoenix, Famke Janssen. Jean Grey's transformation into the Phoenix wasn't just about acting. It was engineered into every costume choice. The writers described the dual personality as an Oedipal drama played out, with the Phoenix embodying a Greek goddess while Jean remained human and grounded. To mark this change visually, Makovsky made one crucial decision: red wardrobe, everyday fabrics. While the X-Men wore tactical leather, Phoenix wore flowing reds and burgundies in normal textiles. The contrast was deliberate. She'd stopped being part of the team. She'd become something else. The real magic happened digitally. Moving Picture Company created hundreds of skin and eye treatments using a 3D model of Janssen's face. When the Dark Phoenix emerged, Jean's skin darkened, veins became visible, and her eyes went completely black. MPC also used particle systems to make her hair appear to move on its own. Subtle visual cues that something supernatural was taking control. As MPC's team explained, "We went through hundreds of iterations with different degrees of darkness, with more or fewer visible veins. At the end, we went for a less is more look, but still enough to give Jean a scary look." Janssen researched dissociative identity disorders and split personalities to inform her performance. The costume and effects teams built everything around that psychological foundation. Mystique. Rebecca Romijn. If Beast had the most elaborate costume, Mystique had the most grueling. Rebecca Romijn's transformation required up to 9 hours. She'd arrive at midnight to be ready for a 9 a.m. call time. By the end of the trilogy, the team had gotten it down to 7 hours. Still brutal. The process began with silicone prosthetics covering 3/4 of her body. The remaining skin was painted blue. No actual costume pieces beyond strategically placed prosthetics. Gordon Smith, the makeup specialist, created the prosthetics from a self-adhesive combination of silicone and latex. No glue required, which also made them recyclable between shooting days. The side effects were unavoidable. Roman recalled, "Blue paint on everything, including every time I had to go use the loo. Blue toilet seats. Everybody knew when I had to go use the bathroom because there was a blue toilet seat." Here's what made it worthwhile. Every single time they finished, and I would look in the mirror, I would just look at it like it was a masterpiece. The irony? In The Last Stand, Mystique loses her powers early in the film and spends most of her screen time as a depowered human with dark hair. All that blue paint expertise, and the character barely uses it. Roman later said the grueling makeup process was actually essential to her performance. There is nothing that turns you into a colder, harder bitch than going through that makeup process. While some characters transformed physically, others changed more subtly, starting with the most iconic villain in the franchise, Magneto. Ian McKellen. Ian McKellen wanted one thing from his Magneto costume: the purple. In the comics, Magneto's signature look features dramatic reds and purples with a flowing cape. McKellen lobbied for this comic-accurate design throughout his time in the franchise. He never got it. Director Bryan Singer had banned comic books from the set of the original film, trying to ground the characters in reality. That philosophy carried through to The Last Stand, even under new director Brett Ratner. McKellen's Magneto wore dark, subdued colors, blacks with hints of crimson, plus a helmet redesigned to look functional rather than flamboyant. As McKellen joked in an interview, "I wasn't allowed to wear that outfit. I don't look like Magneto in the comics." Always shot from the crotch level. The helmet did serve its comic book function, blocking telepathic attacks, but its design prioritized believability over accuracy. It's now housed in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. Even without the purple, it became iconic. Juggernaut. Vinnie Jones. Want to know how you transform a former professional soccer player into an unstoppable behemoth? 4 hours and a lot of foam latex. Vinnie Jones's Juggernaut required a complete body transformation. The muscle suit was made from foam latex lined with spandex, with a zipper closure in the back. Artists hand-punched individual hairs into the chest and arms, then painted realistic skin details including freckles. The goal was making fake muscles look like real muscles. Not easy when you're adding significant bulk to an already athletic frame. The helmet was fiberglass lined with foam for comfort, painted to look like scrap metal with exposed rebar showing through, as if Juggernaut had welded it together himself. A prosthetic chin completed the look, widening Jones's face to match his enlarged body. Here's the controversy. In the comics, Juggernaut isn't a mutant at all. His powers come from a mystical gem called the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, and his helmet specifically protects him from psychic attacks, particularly from his stepbrother, Charles Xavier. The film made him a mutant with no Xavier connection, which means the helmet serves no functional purpose whatsoever. Fans have debated this logic gap for nearly 2 decades. The helmet looks cool. That's the only explanation. Storm, Halle Berry. By The Last Stand, Halle Berry had won an Oscar and demanded more screen time. She got both, plus a complete visual overhaul. Makovsky gave Storm a more modern haircut, shorter and more silvery than previous films. The costume department also expanded her wardrobe beyond the leather battlesuit, dressing her in black civilian clothing to make her tougher and sexier. Berry's Storm retained the one-piece silhouette across the trilogy, though the detailing and materials evolved with each film. The white wig evolution across the trilogy tells its own story. The first film's version was widely criticized as artificial. X2 improved it significantly. By The Last Stand, the shorter style finally looked natural on Berry, though fan opinions remain divided on whether any of the wigs truly captured Storm's comic book appearance. Wolverine. Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman's Wolverine costume in The Last Stand was largely unchanged from X2. Black leather with orange-yellow trim, pattern across the chest, and slots in the gloves for his signature claws. The design drew from Grant Morrison's new X-Men comic run, which had modernized the team's look in 2001. Still far from the classic yellow and blue spandex, but the orange accents were a quiet nod to Wolverine's comic heritage. The claws themselves were rubber with metal armatures, painted silver to simulate adamantium. Multiple versions existed for different scenes. Retracted versions for close-ups, extended versions for action sequences, and specialized stunt versions for fight choreography. What Jackman didn't get until 2024's Deadpool and Wolverine, the actual yellow suit. A version appeared in the Wolverine's alternate ending inside a briefcase, but he never wore it on screen during the Fox era. The leather suits were a product of their time. Studio executives in 2000 believed audiences wouldn't accept colorful comic book costumes. It took 2 decades and a complete franchise handover to prove them wrong. Angel. Ben Foster. Angel's costume tells a story of behind-the-scenes compromise. Ben Foster played Warren Worthington III, a mutant with enormous feathered wings trying to resist his father's mutant cure. The character appears heavily in promotional materials wearing a full X-Men uniform, but in the actual film, he never puts it on. The wings themselves presented unique challenges. The first pair built for Foster were too heavy to wear, forcing the production to remake them entirely from foam. This allowed the 16-foot wingspan to remain manageable while still looking impressive on camera. Foster is actually afraid of heights, but insisted on performing the scene where Angel crashes through a window and flies away. He jumped from the building himself. A stuntman on wires completed the escape. A deleted scene shows Angel returning to the Battle of Alcatraz, fighting alongside the X-Men while wearing the leather uniform glimpsed in posters. Magneto takes him down by throwing car parts at him, but in the theatrical cut, Angel saves his father and vanishes, a founding X-Men member reduced to a subplot, never officially joining the team he was born to lead. Colossus, Daniel Cudmore. Colossus might have the most technically complex costume in the entire film, and he barely has any lines. Daniel Cudmore wore a foam latex muscle suit covered in chrome-plated plastic to simulate organic steel skin. His head was encased in a hard plastic shell, also chrome-plated, which severely limited facial expressions. Digital augmentation enhanced what movement was possible, but the practical suit did most of the heavy lifting. The design allowed Colossus to perform his signature moment, the fastball special, where he throws Wolverine directly at Magneto. A digital double-handled stunt that couldn't be achieved practically, but Cudmore performed everything else in the full metal getup. For a character with minimal dialogue, Colossus represents an enormous investment in practical effects. The chrome plating process alone required precise coordination between costume, makeup, and visual effects departments. The Brotherhood. Beyond the main team, Makovsky had to dress Magneto's entire Brotherhood, a ragtag army of mutants recruited from prisons and underground networks. The design philosophy was intentional chaos. These weren't uniformed soldiers. They were outcasts, criminals, and true believers. Their costumes reflected scrounged materials, punk aesthetics, and individual expression rather than team coordination. Callisto wore leather and chains. Multiple Man dressed in prison-issue clothing. Pyro kept his flame-retardant gear from X2. The visual message was clear. The Brotherhood was everything the X-Men weren't. Undisciplined, dangerous, and proud of it. That covers every major costume from X-Men, The Last Stand. But some of these designs had hidden details most fans never noticed. Which one surprised you most?